Black woman denied first-class seat until she pulls out her government ID. In a bustling terminal at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, tensions flare on a seemingly ordinary day. A poised black woman, dressed for a long-awaited first-class trip, hands over her boarding pass, but the gate agent frowns. Claiming her seat is unavailable. Whispers ripple among passengers, assumptions swirl about who deserves to sit in the front of the plane. Unbeknownst to everyone watching, this traveler holds more than a premium ticket. She wields the power of a high-level government ID. What happens next will unravel the airline's secrets, topple a few egos, and prove once again that appearances aren't everything. Brace yourself. Karma is about to serve a lesson at 35,000 feet. A humid Georgia morning blanketed the highways leading to Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Drivers jockeyed for position on I-85, weaving through the usual rush hour congestion. Among them, 33-year-old Alexandria Lex Martin guided her car deftly through the traffic. Glancing at the time on her dashboard, she was scheduled for a 10 a.m. FLIGHT to Washington, D.C., the next step in a series of crucial meetings that could reshape her future career. She'd scored a brand new position within a governmental agency, the specific details of which she rarely shared. She told close family she was simply moving up in the Department of Justice. That was partially true, but her official capacity was more clandestine than they realized. The position came with perks, including a travel allowance for first-class flights whenever she was on official business. This morning, Lex was heading to the Capitol for a high-level training session, followed by briefings that only people with her clearance could attend. She wore a tailored grey blazer over a crisp white blouse, matched with black slacks. Her neatly tied-back hair and confident demeanor gave off an air of quiet authority, but she tried to keep it low-key. Even after months in her new role, she still wasn't used to the stares that came when her ID came out, a small credential that opened doors most never knew existed. As she pulled into the airport's parking garage, her phone buzzed with an alert. Her flight was on time. Perfect, she thought, stepping out of the car and hoisting a sleek carry-on over her shoulder. She felt that usual jolt of excitement, mixed with a subtle tension she could never quite quell. Flying these days was routine, but always ripe for unpredictability, delays, cancellations, or the occasional rude gate agent. Still, nothing had prepared her for the storm she was about to walk into. Entering the terminal, she navigated the check-in counters with ease, heading straight to the priority line for first-class travelers. She rarely used that status for personal advantage, but it was a perk legitimately afforded by her job. A friendly kiosk spat out her boarding pass, marked Seat 2A, first. So far, so good. Little did Lex know that behind the polished smiles of the airline staff, an unspoken bias was about to strike. Within the next hour, she'd stand face to face with discrimination that questioned her right to sit in first class, and she'd have to decide how far she was willing to push back. Lex strolled through the security checkpoint, presenting her standard ID, not the specialized one, to the TSA officer. She placed her blazer and carry-on in the bins, stepped through the scanner, and emerged on the other side without incident. Rolling her small suitcase behind her, she made her way toward Gate 27. The overhead boards flashed. Air Southern Flight 34180 LDCA. On time, boarding 9:20 a.m. She arrived at the gate area around 9:15 a.m., noticing a line already forming. Business travelers in suits stood alongside families wrangling kids, and a few solo vacationers scrolled through their phones. Everything seemed routine, but the gate agent, a middle-aged man named Rick, wore a strained expression behind the counter. Next to him, a younger agent named Clara scanned boarding passes with a perfunctory beep. Lex took a seat near the window, reviewing some last-minute notes on her phone. Her schedule in DC involved a closed-door briefing. She reminded herself to keep her official capacity quiet. Many people in her agency traveled incognito or semi-incognito for security reasons. She sipped some water, scanning social media absent-mindedly, but kept an eye on the gate. Around 9:20, Rick tapped the microphone. "Good morning, everyone. We'll be starting the boarding process for Air Southern Flight 341 to Washington, D.C. shortly. We'd like to invite first-class passengers, active-duty military, and families with small children to board first." Lex stood, gathering her things. She strode toward the priority lane, a bit back in the short line that formed. The first-class area was never too crowded, typically a dozen or so passengers. However, she sensed some subtle stares, likely because she looked a touch younger than the typical first-class traveler. Clara scanned the first two passengers, wishing them a nice flight. But when it was Lex's turn, the beep from her boarding pass didn't sound. Clara's smile faltered. She glanced at her screen. Miss Martin, just a moment, please." Rick overheard and peered over Clara's shoulder. He frowned. "There's an issue with your seat assignment," he said slowly, eyes flicking to Lex's pass. "It appears seat 2A is not available." Lex frowned, confusion rippling through her. "Not available? It was confirmed when I checked in." Rick avoided her gaze. "Let me see if we can reassign you. Maybe seat 15C in economy is free." A hush of disbelief passed over Lex. "Wait, I purchased a first-class ticket. Why would I be moved to economy? Is there no other first-class seat?" Rick shook his head, mechanical in his response. "The flight is full in first. I'm sorry, Miss Martin, but your seat might have been double-booked." Lex felt a flicker of annoyance. Double bookings happened, but this was suspicious, especially when she heard the soft beep of the next passenger's first-class ticket, scanning just fine. What's going on here? She wondered, her frustration building. She didn't suspect the swirling prejudice yet, but this was the first sign that not everyone believed. She belonged in the front of the plane. Standing at the gate counter, Lex noticed the next three first-class passengers had no trouble scanning in. Each beeped, each got a polite nod from Clara. Meanwhile, she waited, relegated to the side as if she were an afterthought. Her annoyance deepened, but she forced a calm tone. "Excuse me, Rick, could you explain this double booking? Because I checked in with my seat assigned. Are you sure there's no mistake on your end?" Rick typed furiously at his terminal. "I see here seat 2A is currently assigned to Jeff Caldwell. Looks like he checked in earlier this morning. The system must have glitched." Clara, finishing with the next boarding pass, glanced over. "That's weird, Rick. I see Miss Martin also assigned to 2A. She's had that seat for days." Rick grimaced, continuing to avoid Lex's direct gaze. "Well, the other passenger's seat is locked in. We can't bump him. So, Miss Martin, you'll have to fly economy." An uneasy hush fell between them. Lex recognized the subtle undercurrents, Rick's body language, the refusal to meet her eyes, the speed with which he offered to downgrade her seat. Something about it felt more personal than a mere system glitch. She tried to remain polite, but her voice carried a slight edge now. "Rick, I paid for a first-class seat. If the airline made an error, it's on you to fix it. I don't mean to be difficult, but I'm not accepting an economy seat when I have a confirmed ticket for first." Rick's lips thinned. "I understand, Miss Martin, but I don't see how we can accommodate you in first class. It's sold out, unless you want to wait for another flight." Her frustration flared. That would mean missing her critical meeting in DC. Absolutely not. She crossed her arms, inhaling slowly. "I can't just miss this flight. Look, can you bump someone else? An employee traveling on a non-revenue pass, maybe? Or offer someone a voucher to switch flights?" Clara stepped in quietly, We do have airline staff flying standby in first class sometimes. We can check that, Rick. But Rick shook his head quickly. No staff listed for this flight, Clara. Let me confirm if there are any volunteers to move. He grabbed the intercom mic. Attention, all first-class passengers. We have an issue with seat assignment. Is anyone willing to... Before he could finish, a hand landed gently on his shoulder. Another gate agent in a different uniform approached, whispering something to Rick. Rick nodded tensely, then resumed the announcement, but with far less conviction. Yes, so. We might need a volunteer to move to economy for compensation. Any takers, please approach the desk. Lex waited, heart pounding. She half expected someone to approach, but as the minutes ticked on, no volunteers came. The final boarding call loomed. She overheard snatches of conversation from other passengers, a few casting her sympathetic looks. Yet no one stepped forward. Just then, Jeff Caldwell, the passenger assigned to 2A, appeared behind Lex, carrying a fancy briefcase and wearing an expensive watch. "Everything okay, folks?" he asked, scanning Lex with a quick flick of his eyes, then ignoring her. Rick brightened, greeting Caldwell like an old friend. "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell. We're all set for your seat in first." "Thanks for checking in." Caldwell breezed past, heading down the jet bridge without a second thought. Lex watched him go, dismayed, while Rick turned back with a half-smile. "So sorry, Miss Martin. If you'll just take seat 15C." That was when Lex realized politeness wasn't cutting it. If she wanted her rightful seat, she might have to escalate, and soon. Lex stepped aside, letting a few more economy passengers scan their boarding passes. She felt herself trembling, a mix of anger and disbelief swirling inside. Yes, airline mix-ups happened, but the vibe here was unsettling. The gate staff's tone, their reluctance to do a thorough search for a resolution, the way Rick addressed Mr. Caldwell so warmly compared to his stiff formality with her, it all raised red flags. She couldn't afford to be bumped to another flight. Her meeting in DC was at 3 p.m., and the next suitable flight wouldn't get her there in time. Checking her watch, she saw that boarding was nearly complete. If she didn't board soon, she'd be left behind. Gathering her courage, she approached Rick again. "Could you please see if seat 2B is taken? I noticed it wasn't assigned online earlier. She'd done some seat map reconnaissance the day before." Rick looked at his computer. "Seat 2B is assigned to a Diamond Medallion passenger from our codeshare partner. They might just not have boarded yet." Clara interjected. "Actually, that passenger called earlier. They cancelled last minute because of a personal emergency." She clicked her mouse, verifying the note. "I see it right here, Rick." A flicker of something crossed Rick's face, irritation, or maybe guilt, but he shook his head. "I still see them on the manifest. Must be a mismatch. We can't just seat miss Martin there. If there's any possibility the original passenger might arrive. That passenger told me specifically they had to rebook." "The seat is definitely open," Clara insisted. Lex's heartbeat soared. "If 2B is open, can I please have that seat? That solves all problems." But Rick's expression hardened. "We don't just give away first-class seats if the passenger might come last minute. It's not guaranteed. You should just board in economy to avoid missing the flight." Lex had had enough. She took a slow breath, deciding whether to drop her professional courtesy and escalate. But a small voice in her mind whispered, "Be careful how you respond. The public can be quick to label an outspoken black woman as aggressive." Still, she couldn't let intimidation sway her. "Rick," she began calmly, "I'm not leaving this gate until I get my confirmed first-class seat. I'm traveling on official business. With a ticket I purchased. If I need to speak to a supervisor, I will." His eyes flicked to her. "Official business? So you're a politician or something?" We get lots of people claiming they have to sit in first. Lex forced a neutral expression. So that's what this is, a gate agent suspicious that I'm lying about my status. She pulled out her phone, half considering if she should show him her booking receipt or escalate further. A swirl of emotions flooded her: resentment, frustration, and a quiet determination. She'd spent months training for her role, earned the privilege of flying first for these mandated trips, and she was done being politely ignored. If Rick insisted on doubting her, she had a bigger card to play, her government ID. But unveiling that might set off a chain of events she could no longer control. Time ticked closer to the flight's scheduled departure. The trickle of remaining passengers in economy boarded, offering Lex sympathetic or curious glances as they passed. The overhead monitor flashed "Final boarding" in bold letters. Rick announced they'd be closing the gate soon. Lex refused to budge. She stood near the podium, heart thumping. If I don't board now, I'll miss my meeting. But if I board in economy, I relinquish my rightful seat. Her sense of injustice blazed. She also recognized that if she missed her official briefing in DC, it could derail months of work. Rick glanced at her with visible annoyance. "Miss Martin, I'm sorry. We can't hold the flight for you. If you don't want 15C, we'll have to mark you as a no-show." She exhaled slowly, her mind racing. A passenger near the window seats called out, "Is there a problem with the flight?" "She's been waiting forever." Lex felt her cheeks burn as all eyes fell on her. It was do or die time. She considered pulling out her specialized ID, an official credential from the Department of Justice that granted her certain clearances. But that ID was meant to be shown discreetly, typically in secured areas, or when verifying her high-level clearance. Flashing it publicly could raise security questions or blow her cover. Yet what else can I do? Unable to see any other option, Lex mentally prepared herself. She walked up to the podium, leaning in so her voice wouldn't carry. "Rick, I'm not just any traveler. I have official duties in Washington. I have a first-class ticket. I'd like to show you something that might clarify the seriousness of my request." Rick frowned. "What are you talking about?" She drew out a slim card holder from her blazer pocket, carefully flipping it open to reveal an ID with a federal seal. It didn't scream top secret agent, but the name of her specific division was stamped there, along with a photo of her, the official seal, and authorization codes. That should be enough to show him I'm not faking this, she thought. His reaction was immediate, surprise, then wariness. He read the text. "Department of Justice. Are you law enforcement?" She snapped the holder shut, slipping it away. "All you need to know is that I'm on government travel. My seat assignment is legitimate. I have a critical meeting I cannot miss." Rick looked flustered. "Ma'am, I didn't realize. Why didn't you say so earlier?" Lex felt a surge of anger. "I shouldn't have to brandish my credentials to get the seat I paid for." Instead of voicing that, she said calmly, "So can I board first class now or not?" Rick's eyes flicked to the flight status screen. Less than 5 minutes until gate closure. Let me see what I can do." At last, an opening, but the question remained, would he truly honor her ticket? Or had her bold move only complicated things further? Lex stepped onto the aircraft with her heart still pounding from the confrontation at the gate. The tension in the air felt palpable to her, though most passengers in first class seemed relaxed in their plush seats, sipping pre-departure beverages or scrolling through their phones. Unlike them, she had just fought tooth and nail for the seat, printed on her boarding pass, now seat 2B, when the gate agents tried to banish her to economy on a flimsy double-booking excuse. She paused in the aisle, scanning row numbers until she reached the second row. A man in seat 2A was already settled, an older, well-dressed gentleman with silver-streaked hair. His monogrammed briefcase peeked out from under the seat in front of him. Lex recognized him from the gate area. Jeff Caldwell, the passenger whose name had been invoked when they claimed seat 2A was taken. It crossed her mind that maybe he was part of the fiasco, but she couldn't say for sure. As she stowed her carry-on overhead, Caldwell glanced up, giving her a cursory once-over before returning to the document he was reading. She silently slid into 2B, fastening her seat belt and exhaling in relief. At least I made it on board, she told herself, forcing her pulse to slow. Her job required her to be calm under pressure, yet the swirl of indignation lingered. Why did they treat me like a trespasser? Shortly after, a flight attendant came by, offering a tray of welcome drinks, orange juice or champagne. Lex declined, her stomach still knotted from the stress. Caldwell took a champagne flute, sipping it while flicking the corner of his paper with a faint air of entitlement. While the plane prepared for departure, a second flight attendant, tall and slim, with a name tag reading Gabriel, moved down the aisle, double-checking seat assignments on a handheld device. Lex watched warily. No other passenger garnered more than a quick glance, but when he reached 2B, he paused, eyebrows knitting. "You must be Miss Martin," he said, scanning her seat number. "Everything okay? We had a note at the gate about your last-minute seat change." Lex felt her anger flicker again. "They call it a last-minute seat change. I had this seat on my ticket all along." She nodded tersely. "Yes, I'm all set now." He hovered a second longer than necessary, as if weighing whether to ask for more details. Then, apparently deciding against it, Gabriel moved on. Lex exhaled. Despite gaining the seat, she sensed there was a continuing undercurrent of suspicion, as though the staff believed she had manipulated the system. Moments later, the doors closed and the aircraft pushed back from the gate. The typical safety demonstration followed, flight attendants instructing everyone on seat belts and life vests. Lex forced herself to pay attention, even though her mind raced with what had transpired. What if I hadn't pulled out my government ID? Would they have forced me to miss my flight entirely? Takeoff proved smooth, the engines roaring as the plane ascended into the Atlanta skyline. Lex pressed her head back against the seat, letting the surge of altitude wash over her. She'd always found flying exhilarating, an escape from daily routines, but today that sense of freedom felt overshadowed by the morning's indignities. Once cruising altitude was reached and the seatbelt sign dinged off, a flurry of activity began. Flight attendants scurried to ready the cabin for in-flight service, stowing the safety video equipment and preparing beverage carts. Caldwell lowered his tray table, apparently anticipating the drinks and snacks. Lex, however, kept her tray folded, uncertain how engaged she wanted to be in the standard first-class pampering. She was still on edge, uncertain if yet another staff member might question her presence. Before long, a friendly-looking flight attendant, an older woman named Sandy, arrived to offer the first-class passengers their choice of drinks. She greeted Caldwell politely, then turned to Lex with a smile. "Welcome aboard, Miss Martin. May I get you anything? Water? Coffee? Something stronger?" Lex appreciated her courtesy. "Water would be great. Thank you." Sandy set a glass of chilled water on Lex's tray table and moved on. At least one normal interaction, Lex thought. She took a sip, letting the cool liquid calm her frazzled nerves. However, just as she began to hope the rest of the flight might pass without further incident, Gabriel re-emerged. He paused beside 2A, leaning in to speak with Caldwell in hushed tones. Though they kept their voices low, Lex caught bits of the conversation. "Yes, sir. Seat issue. The gate staff informed us, verifying everything is correct." Caldwell nodded, casting a quick sideways glance at Lex. It felt like a fresh wave of scrutiny. Lex pretended to check her phone, still in airplane mode, of course, willing her pulse to remain steady. "They're still suspicious. Why?" The possibility gnawed at her. Could it be they think a black woman in first class must be a fraud? She'd encountered subtle biases in the past, but rarely so blatant. Soon, Gabriel approached her side, clearing his throat. Everything's all right, but we might need to confirm details after takeoff. We got a note that the seat assignment was changed only because you showed an ID. Lex set her water down slowly, controlling her temper. Yes, your gate agent messed up. I had a confirmed first-class ticket from the start. He shifted awkwardly. Right, the first C. Well, if there's any discrepancy, we'll sort it out mid-flight or upon landing. She forced a tight smile. There is no discrepancy. My seat is valid. I'll be in DC soon, and that's all that matters. Gabriel nodded, but the uneasy look in his eyes betrayed that this wasn't the last she'd hear of it. They're not letting this go, she realized. The cabin might look calm, passengers sipping champagne, flipping through magazines, but a quiet storm brewed beneath. Caldwell smirked from seat 2A, as if privately reveling in the drama. Lex turned away, focusing on the clouds outside. The airline staff might be polite on the surface, but their mistrust radiated like a subtle wave. She braced herself for the rest of the flight, suspecting that the real confrontation was yet to come when she'd have to prove, once again, that she wasn't a con artist sneaking into first class, but a legitimate government employee with every right to be there. Still, as the plane sailed on, she vowed she'd handle it. She'd faced tougher adversity in her line of work. If they wanted to question her seat or her ID again, she'd answer with the truth and ensure that those who doubted her learned a lesson about underestimating people based on preconceived notions. The hush of the engines lulled the cabin, but for Lex, the turbulence was far from over. The plane soared into a brilliant morning sky, the engine's hum vibrating through the first-class cabin. Normally, Lex loved this part of flying, watching the city shrink below and feeling the gentle press of acceleration. But today, frustration clung to her like static. She tried to shake it off, reminding herself that she had bigger tasks ahead in DC. When the seatbelt sign dinged off, 2 flight attendants moved through the aisle, handing out hot towels. Mr. Caldwell, in seat 2A, accepted one with a curt nod. Lex politely declined, preferring to gather her thoughts. She half expected the attendant to ignore her altogether, but the woman gave a neutral smile and moved on. No sooner had the towels been collected than a third flight attendant, a tall, stern-looking man named Gabriel, appeared. He paused by Lex's seat, scanning a list on his handheld device. Miss Martin, correct? Lex's stomach dropped a bit. She nodded. Here we go again? Yes, he lowered his voice, but not enough to be fully private. I was informed there was an issue at the gate with your seat assignment. Everything resolved now? A couple of other first-class passengers eavesdropped. Lex could feel their eyes. She swallowed. Yes, I'm here in 2B. The seat's fine. Gabriel nodded but didn't move on. We had a double booking scenario. Just ensuring you're supposed to be here. His gaze flicked from her face to the seat, as if verifying no stowaway. Then he gave a perfunctory smile. All right, ma'am. Enjoy the flight. Lex bit back a retort. Why the extra scrutiny for her and no one else? She'd never seen a flight attendant check seat assignments mid-flight like this. Is this standard procedure or something else? She let the moment pass, exhaling slowly, though her pulse thrummed with indignation. A few rows ahead, a slender blonde passenger twisted around, her expression curious. Lex pretended not to notice. She reminded herself, stay calm, you have work to do, don't let them see they've rattled you. She pulled out her laptop, determined to review some notes for her upcoming briefing. But even as she clicked through her files, the tension lingered. She replayed the gate confrontation. She'd had to produce her government ID, something she never brandished lightly. The phone call from her boss still echoed in her memory. Protect your credentials. Don't reveal more than necessary. Yet circumstances forced her hand. A short while later, a beverage cart arrived. Another flight attendant, this time a cheerful older woman named Sandy, offered drinks and a small tray of warm nuts. Lex managed a grateful smile, accepting water. At least Sandy treated her normally. Still, the question gnawed at her. Would the rest of this flight remain overshadowed by suspicion and microaggressions? The near future promised more drama, especially if the staff had any further illusions about whether she belonged in first class. And if so, Lex intended to be ready with the full weight of her authority. As the flight cruised at 35,000 feet, the cabin lights dimmed slightly to create a tranquil atmosphere. Lex tried to immerse herself in the text of her classified briefing documents, but her concentration faltered whenever she sensed the eyes of Mr. Caldwell drifting her way. She glanced to the side, noticing Caldwell's designer watch glinting under the overhead lamp. He was flipping through the airline magazine, but every so often he'd glance at Lex, then look away if she caught him. She wondered if he was resentful about the seat fiasco, if he thought she was some kind of imposter who'd snagged a first-class upgrade without merit. Service in the cabin continued. A flight attendant took meal orders from the front row backward. When she reached 2A and 2B, Caldwell requested the grilled chicken option, specifying certain dietary needs. Then it was Lex's turn. She requested the vegetarian pasta. As the attendant wrote it down, Caldwell suddenly cleared his throat. "Excuse me, is it normal to have seat confusion in first class? I almost lost my seat earlier to some glitch." The attendant blinked, momentarily startled. "Yes, sir, we had a double booking, but it's resolved now. We apologize for any inconvenience." Caldwell let out a soft chuckle. "Guess I was lucky to check in early." He cut a glance at Lex. Not everyone thinks ahead. Lex felt a flush creeping up her neck. She refrained from responding, focusing on her laptop. The attendant, sensing tension, quickly said, "If you need anything else, please let me know," and hustled away. Moments later, she heard Caldwell mumble under his breath. "Government ID, sure, just loud enough for her to catch." A pang of anger rippled through her. "He's openly questioning the validity of my credentials now." She considered ignoring him. Escalating a spat mid-flight wouldn't solve anything. But frustration mounted. She inhaled, recalling her training in conflict de-escalation. Don't take the bait unless necessary. Instead, she tapped away at her laptop, determined to project calm. "Mr." Caldwell eventually returned to his magazine, but the atmosphere remained thick with unspoken tension. Lex's mind churned. People always say first class is more comfortable, more civilized. If only they knew the hostility hiding behind polite smiles. Yet she couldn't let that overshadow her mission. She needed to arrive in DC composed, ready to tackle the briefings. So she forced herself to tune out Caldwell's sideways glances, focusing on her documents. She'd handle the airline staff and their possible prejudices once the flight ended. Still, an unsettled feeling told her that the confrontation at the gate might be just the start. If Caldwell or the flight crew continued to question her legitimacy, how much more trouble could they cause before landing? She resolved to keep her cool, but also to stand firm if pushed further. Around halfway into the flight, the captain announced moderate turbulence ahead, instructing passengers to remain seated with seat belts fastened. The flight attendants hurried to secure the cabin, collecting half-finished drinks and meal trays. Lex felt the plane lurch gently, a reminder of how fragile control can be at cruising altitude. She braced herself, laptop closed, eyes drifting shut to quell a wave of nausea. Turbulence rarely bothered her, but tension on top of a rocky ride was enough to unsettle anyone. The overhead bins rattled, and the seatbelt sign glowed. In the swirl of mild turbulence, the flight attendants strapped into their jump seats. Mr. Caldwell grunted, adjusting his seatbelt. He shot Lex another unkind look, as if the rough air was somehow her fault. She fought an urge to roll her eyes. Suddenly, a jolt of heavier turbulence rocked the cabin. Passengers gasped, and a child shrieked in the rows behind. Lex's heart leapt, but she steadied herself, reminding herself that planes are designed to handle far worse. For a few tense minutes, the plane rattled and shook. Then, just as quickly, calm returned. Exhaling in relief, Lex noticed a flight attendant, Gabriel, the tall one who'd questioned her earlier unbuckling from the jump seat. He spoke quickly into a handset, presumably updating the cockpit that first class was secure. Then he approached row 2, leaning over Caldwell's seat. "Mr. Caldwell, everything all right?" Gabriel asked, voice low but audible to Lex. Caldwell nodded. "Fine. Didn't spill my coffee at least." He hesitated, then nodded toward Lex. "What about her?" Lex's eyebrows shot up. "What does he mean by her?" Gabriel cleared his throat, glancing at Lex with a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ma'am, you okay?" Lex forced a polite nod. "I'm fine, thanks." Caldwell muttered something about hope that seat's legit, but the plane's ventilation noise drowned out the specifics. Gabriel offered an uneasy shrug, then resumed checking on other passengers. Biting her lip, Lex told herself to let it go. She was used to subtle insinuations, especially as a black woman in spaces where some believed she didn't belong. Yet each microaggression chipped away at her composure. She closed her eyes, taking measured breaths. Focus on the end goal, she reminded herself. She had vital meetings that would shape an upcoming federal initiative. People were counting on her to be fully present in D.C. If Caldwell or any flight attendant wanted to insinuate she was a fraud or had stolen the seat, that was on them. In a few hours, she'd be on the ground, far from this petty drama. But deep down, she knew some lines once crossed couldn't be easily uncrossed. She wondered if an even bigger confrontation awaited her once the flight landed. Because sometimes, prejudice doesn't slink away quietly. It demands a final stand. As the turbulence subsided, the flight attendants resumed service. Sandy, the cheerful attendant, brought out meal trays for first class. Lex's vegetarian pasta arrived, complete with a side salad and a warm roll. She thanked Sandy, mustering a polite smile. Caldwell's chicken dish appeared next, and he made a point of checking every detail, asking for extra dressing and an additional roll. With a silent sigh, Lex began eating. At least the food was decent, a small consolation. But halfway through the meal, the hush in the cabin broke when Caldwell spoke up, directly addressing Lex for the first time. "Ma'am," he said, forcing civility, "I'm curious. You said you're on government business?" "That's quite a claim. Mind if I ask which agency?" His tone dripped with condescension, as though he expected her to fail the question. Lex swallowed her annoyance. "I work under the Department of Justice," she said simply, not volunteering specifics. Caldwell raised an eyebrow. The DOJ, huh? That's interesting. I meet a lot of federal employees in first class, but usually they travel with bigger budgets. You sure you're not using some friend's buddy pass or something? Lex's chest tightened. "No. I'm quite certain," she replied, voice measured. The old adage, "never feed the trolls," flashed in her mind. This man was spoiling for a fight. Before she could say more, Gabriel reappeared at Caldwell's side, ready to clear trays. Caldwell seized the moment. "I was just telling Miss Martin here that it's unusual for someone like her to pop up last minute in first class." "Lucky break, I guess." Gabriel shifted uncomfortably, stacking Caldwell's plates. He avoided Lex's eyes. "Well, seat assignments are final now. So, indeed," Caldwell said, cutting him off. "I just hope the real passenger with a legitimate claim to that seat doesn't show up mid-flight." He offered a smug chuckle, as though sharing a private joke. Lex set her fork down slowly. She'd reached her limit. Turning to Caldwell, she took a calming breath. "Sir, I've already explained my seat is confirmed. If you have a problem, I suggest you speak with the airline's management. Otherwise, please let me enjoy my flight." He shrugged, unconvinced. Sure. Just curious, that's all." Gabriel, sensing the tension, quickly cleared Lex's tray. "Anything else I can get you, Miss Martin?" Lex forced a tight smile. "I'm fine, thank you." As Gabriel departed, Caldwell murmured, "Government ID my foot," under his breath. Lex stiffened, ignoring him. She'd done her best to remain composed, but anger roiled in her stomach. She vowed that once they landed, she'd not only file a formal complaint against the gate agent, but also ensure that if Caldwell or any staff tried to question her validity again, they'd be put in their place. Little did she know the final blow-up was coming sooner than she expected, right before the plane touched down, in a confrontation that would drag her credentials into the spotlight for all to see. The flight neared its final descent, the cabin lights brightening as attendants prepared for landing. Lex stored her laptop and fastened her seatbelt, eager to be on the ground. She hoped to exit quickly, catch a cab, and head straight to her meeting. Suddenly, the PA crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reed from the flight deck. We'll be landing in Washington, D.C. in about 20 minutes. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until the seatbelt sign is turned off. Thank you." Across the aisle, Caldwell gathered his belongings, clearly prepping to disembark swiftly. Lex double-checked her phone, ensuring it was in airplane mode. The tension from earlier still hung in the air like stale cologne. Just then, Gabriel approached row 2, kneeling beside Caldwell's seat. He spoke in hushed tones, but Lex overheard bits. "Yes, sir. Pass her ID around," management said. "Verify upon landing." Something about it made Lex's stomach lurch. "Are they planning to verify my ID again?" Caldwell nodded vigorously, pointing at Lex as if she weren't right there. Gabriel turned to her. "Miss Martin, I'm sorry, but we have a procedure to follow. We received word from the gate staff that your seat assignment might require further verification upon landing. Could you remain seated until an airline representative boards to clarify?" A flame of fury ignited inside Lex. "They want me to remain behind as the airline rep boards the plane for a seat assignment that's already been resolved." Her voice quivered with restrained anger. "Are you implying I used a fake ticket or false ID because I've shown legitimate credentials?" Gabriel glanced nervously at Caldwell, then back at Lex. "I'm just following instructions, ma'am." Caldwell smirked, chiming in, "I'd say better safe than sorry. People lie all the time." Lex bit back a scathing reply. She realized any outburst might feed their narrative that she was disruptive. Instead, she fixed Gabriel with a piercing stare. "I have no intention of missing my next appointment. If your airline rep wants to speak to me, they can do it on the jet bridge or inside the terminal. I won't hamper deplaning." Gabriel hesitated as if uncertain how to proceed. "Well, I was told," Lex interrupted softly but firmly, "I'm a federal employee on official travel. I don't need special treatment, but I also won't be singled out as a suspect. Let your rep come to me in the terminal. If they still have doubts, they can contact my agency. Understood?" At that moment, the plane jolted slightly, wheels lowering for landing. Gabriel braced himself. "We're about to touch down. Could we discuss this after we land?" Lex nodded, her jaw clenched. "Fine." She forced herself to face forward, ignoring Caldwell's self-satisfied smirk. The plane dropped through a layer of clouds, runway lights coming into view. Lex's heart pounded. Enough is enough. "As soon as we land, I'll handle this once and for all." The landing was smooth, the reverse thrusters roaring as the plane decelerated along the runway at Reagan National Airport. Passengers shifted eagerly, popping seat belts open the moment the plane slowed to taxi speed. Lex stayed calm, reviewing in her mind how she'd handle the airline rep. She refused to be the last passenger singled out on the plane. Finally, the seat belt sign switched off. Gabriel's voice came over the intercom. "Welcome to Washington, D.C. Please remain seated until we've parked at the gate. Thank you for flying Air Southern." As soon as the cabin door opened, Caldwell stood, snatching his briefcase. He glared at Lex with a triumphant look, then joined the line of disembarking passengers. Another wave of relief and annoyance washed over Lex. Let him go. She'd face the airline's so-called verification demands by herself. But the moment Lex stood to retrieve her bag, Gabriel blocked the aisle. "Ma'am, I have to ask you to wait here until an Air Southern official comes aboard." Her eyes narrowed. "I told you, I'm not staying on board to cause a spectacle. I'll speak to them in the jet bridge or at the gate if they insist." He hesitated. "Please, Miss Martin, I could get in trouble if you just walk off." A swirl of emotions welled up: outrage, humiliation. She took a deep breath, remembering her training. Stay calm, remain professional. "Fine. Let's step into the jet bridge, where we're not blocking other passengers." She motioned to the near-empty aisle behind him. Gabriel led the way, ushering Lex onto the jet bridge. The short corridor connecting plane to terminal was mostly empty now, aside from a couple of stragglers. An airline supervisor with a name tag reading Janice, customer service lead, rushed in, carrying a tablet. Janice quickly assessed Lex, then turned to Gabriel. "Is this Miss Martin?" Gabriel nodded. "Yes." Janice's face tightened. "Miss Martin, we received conflicting reports about your first-class seat. Could you provide documentation proving your ticket purchase?" Lex nearly laughed in disbelief. "They're doubling down." She unlocked her phone, quickly pulling up the receipt for her flight, which clearly stated first class, seat 2A. She pointed to the date and time stamps. "Here it is. Also, the gate agent ended up assigning me 2B when 2A was allegedly double-booked." Janice studied the screen. Why wasn't this resolved at the gate? She threw a reproachful glance at Gabriel. Lex's patience frayed. "I tried. They insisted I move to economy. I had to show my government ID to get them to fix their error." Janice's eyes widened. "Government ID? Let me see that, please." Lex paused, uncertain about revealing it again, but if it ended this farce, so be it. She produced the small ID holder, flipping it open briefly for Janice to view. The official seal glimmered under the overhead lights. Janice's posture stiffened, realization dawning. "Miss Martin, I apologize deeply. This is an unacceptable ordeal. We have no further questions." "One, I'm so sorry." She turned to Gabriel. "Please inform your colleagues we were in the wrong." "Miss Martin, if there's anything we can do..." Lex nodded curtly, sliding her ID away. "I have a meeting to catch. Let's just say I'll be filing a formal complaint." With that, she strode into the terminal, refusing to look back. The conflict might be resolved for now, but she suspected the fallout had only begun. Lex arrived at her DC briefing with minutes to spare, mind still whirling from the fiasco. She forced herself to focus on the matter at hand, reviewing a set of critical documents for an upcoming operation. But once the meeting ended, her phone buzzed incessantly with messages and missed calls. She recognized the number: Air Southern's Customer Relations Department. She found a quiet corner in the government building and returned the call. A polite but frazzled-sounding representative named Monica apologized profusely. "Miss Martin, we've reviewed your complaint. We see that gate agent Rick and flight attendant Gabriel escalated an issue unnecessarily. We want to assure you we're taking corrective measures." Lex inhaled, deciding how forthright to be. "I appreciate the apology, Monica, but I want a clear outline of what corrective measures means." The gate agent acted suspiciously from the start, ignoring available seats in first class. The flight attendant singled me out mid-flight. How do I know it won't happen again? Monica's voice strained with sincerity. We are launching a full internal review. Their superiors will investigate any possible bias or misconduct. Additionally, we want to offer you a travel voucher. Lex cut in. I'm not looking for freebies. I want your employees to respect paying passengers, regardless of assumptions about race or background. She paused, voice softening. And if someone has an official government ID or not, it shouldn't matter. This was about me being a black woman in first class and them thinking I didn't belong. Monica hesitated. Yes, Miss Martin, that aspect is exactly what we're addressing. The staff will undergo additional training. We're also reviewing if immediate disciplinary action is warranted. Lex closed her eyes, exhaustion swirling. Fine, keep me updated. If you need me to provide statements or speak with HR, I will, but let's be clear, this can't be swept under the rug. They ended the call, a sense of partial closure drifting over Lex. She recognized that large airlines often handle complaints quietly, with vague promises. She dreaded being placated, but at least she had the credentials and the willingness to escalate if necessary. Over the next few days, a flurry of emails confirmed that Rick, Clara, and Gabriel were interviewed by Air Southern's HR department. Clara was exonerated. She'd tried to help Lex. Rick and Gabriel faced internal disciplinary hearings. The airline also rolled out new bias awareness modules for gate staff. Lex felt a mixture of relief and lingering anger. Did any real transformation occur, or was this just corporate damage control? She wasn't sure. She did know that any future flights on Air Southern would see her more vigilant than ever. Meanwhile, her duties at the Department of Justice rolled on, overshadowing the personal frustrations she'd endured that morning in Atlanta. But fate had a way of ensuring that such stories didn't remain private for long. A week later, Lex's phone lit up with a barrage of text messages from colleagues and friends. One contained a link to a local news segment in Atlanta, Air Southern Airline under fire for alleged racial discrimination, gate agent suspended. Lex's heart jumped. She clicked the link, watching a short clip featuring an African-American reporter explaining how a recent incident involving a black woman denied her first-class seat sparked an internal investigation. The reporter didn't name Lex directly. She recognized that the airline must have kept her identity private to respect her government role. Still, the story highlighted the gate agent's behavior and that an official complaint led to immediate changes. Social media was abuzz with hashtags like #FlyingWhileBlack and #FirstClassEquality. Friends texted, "Is this about you? So proud of you for standing up," she replied, vaguely, neither confirming nor denying. Her superiors at the DOJ had advised discretion regarding her identity, but privately, she felt vindicated that the issue was receiving attention. Later that day, she received a personal call from Monica at Air Southern. "Miss Martin, we've decided to terminate Rick, the gate agent, after finding repeated complaints of bias in his record. Gabriel will be reassigned and must undergo comprehensive retraining. We want to reaffirm our apology and gratitude for bringing this to our attention." Lex's mixed emotions welled up. Part of her felt sorry that someone lost his job, yet the repeated misconduct implied a pattern. She realized her case might have saved future passengers from similar harassment. "Thank you for the update, Monica," she said softly. "I truly hope this sparks real change." Monica's voice trembled with earnestness. "We're overhauling several staff policies. We'd also like to host a meeting with you to discuss improving our internal bias training, if you'd be open to it." Lex considered the offer. Though her schedule was packed, the chance to help shape airline policy was tempting. "I'll see what I can do." "Time permitting," she replied. When she hung up, a sense of closure washed over her. This wasn't just about her seat or her day's inconvenience. It was about challenging a system that too often questions the legitimacy of black women occupying prestigious spaces. She had used her government ID to claim a seat that was rightfully hers, but the underlying issue went beyond a single flight. In the weeks that followed, Lex juggled her intense workload in DC and found time to quietly advise Air Southern on inclusive training programs. Although she remained largely anonymous to the public, her story circulated within the airline as a cautionary tale. Never assume someone doesn't belong because they might just have the power, the proof, and the will to fight back. Thank you for following this intense journey, where a simple ticket dispute exploded into a lesson on bias, justice, and resilience. From the moment Lex Martin tried to board her first-class seat, only to be dismissed by skeptical gate agents, we saw how hidden prejudices surface in everyday scenarios. Yet in her determination, Lex showcased that you can confront injustice without losing your composure or your dignity. If her story resonated with you, please remember to click that like button, share it with friends who believe in challenging unfair treatment, and subscribe to this channel for more stories that illuminate real societal pitfalls. Your engagement helps us keep these narratives alive, reminding everyone that sometimes a single ID card or a single act of standing up can unravel systemic prejudice. Thank you for watching, and never forget, each small victory against bias can pave the way for a more inclusive future.